Mr. Alator. This is Jacob Herrity speaking, and I'm giving an informative speech to Western Iowa Tech Community College. Hello audience, I'm going to inform you about the history of tobacco in the United States. The history of tobacco has a long line of pros and cons. As an audience member and a speaker, we typically associate the word with death and disease, and there is certainly nothing wrong with that. I'm sure we can all relate to tobacco in some type of way, whether you've lost a family member or you know someone who uses tobacco. Just to clarify things, I am not speaking to promote or degrade the use of tobacco, but rather give an insight on the history of tobacco in the United States. The history of tobacco in the United States was used long before we gained our independence. Tobacco was the first cash crop grown for money in North America. The first successful commercial crop was cultivated in Virginia in 1612 by Englishman John Rolfe. Within 7 years, it was the colony's largest export. Over the next 2 centuries, the growth of tobacco as a cash crop fueled the demand in North America for slave labor. In 1612, the settlers of the first American colony in Jamestown, Virginia, grew tobacco as a cash crop. Other cash crops were corn, wheat, sugar, and soybeans. Tobacco helped pay for the American Revolution against Great Britain. At first, tobacco was produced mainly for pipe smoking, chewing, and snuff. Cigars didn't become popular until the early 1800s. Cigarettes, which had been around in crude form since before the Civil War, didn't become widely popular in the United States until the late 1800s. Cigarette sales surged again with the introduction of the white burley tobacco leaf and the invention of the cigarette making machine. It was not until James Bonsack invented the cigarette making machine in 1881 that cigarette smoking became widespread. Bonsack's cigarette making machine could make 120,000 cigarettes a day. He went into business with Washington Duke's son, James Buck Duke. They built a factory and made 10 million cigarettes their first year and 1 billion cigarettes their next 5 years. James Duke and his father, Washington Duke, started the first tobacco company in North America. Easily enough, they named it the American Tobacco Company. The American Tobacco Company was the largest and most powerful tobacco company in the early 1900s. In 1902, the Philip Morris Company came out with the Marlboro brand. Everything changed during World War I and World War II. Soldiers overseas were given free cigarettes. At home, production increased and cigarettes were being marketed to women too. More than any other war, World War II brought more independence for women. Many of them went to work and started smoking for the first time while their husbands were away. By 1944, cigarette production was up to 300 billion a year. Servicemen received about 70% of all cigarettes produced. The wars were good for the tobacco company. Since World War II, there have been 6 giant cigarette companies in the United States. On August 7th in 1964, the Surgeon General of the United States wrote a report about the dangers of cigarette smoking. He said, quote, that the nicotine and tar in cigarettes cause lung cancer, mouth cancer, and heart disease. This promotion caused for the Cigarette Labeling and Advertising Act in 1965. It said that every cigarette pack must have a warning label on its side stating cigarettes may be hazardous to your health. By the 1980s, the tobacco company had come out with new brands of cigarettes with lower amounts of tar and nicotine and improved filters to keep their customers buying and to help reduce their fears. The early 1980s were called the Tar Wars because tobacco companies competed aggressively to make over 100 low tar and ultra low tar cigarettes. Each company made and sold many different brands of cigarettes. In 1984, Congress passed another law called the Comprehensive Smoking Education Act. It said that cigarette companies every 3 months had to change the warning labels on cigarette packs. It created 4 different labels for the companies to rotate. These labels include these following. It says, smoking causes lung cancer, heart disease, emphysema, and may complicate pregnancy. Quitting smoking now greatly reduces serious risks to your health. Smoking by pregnant women may result in fetal injury, premature birth, and low birth weight. And cigarette smoke contains carbon monoxide. Now that you know some basic information about the history of tobacco in the United States, you can inform someone who doesn't know much about the history of tobacco in the United States.